the centre then? Number of years now?
This centre,
Yeah.
I think it was summer of 2013, 12-13.
Yeah.
I first appeared on a Monday night,
Yeah.
on the very last Monday night of the year, so it was one where everyone brought food, and I'd just come down from Sydney.
Yeah.
So it was a nice way to meet everyone, and then everyone went on holidays. So I came back 2 months later, and I've been coming here ever since. But there's there'll be a punctuation in there that I'll probably talk about a little bit, which has something to do with what brought me to the Melbourne Buddhist Centre, or the Tree Ratner version of Buddhism, if I can use that. So thanks for asking me to do this. I was a bit nervous, I was unsure, I was almost not going to do it. And one of the main reasons was because when it was put to me, why am I a Buddhist? And Snighty had a slip of the tongue and said, "Why am I the Buddha?" But why am I a Buddhist? I thought to myself, well, I'm not. That was like internally, the dialogue that happens is that I'm not a Buddhist, but I practice Buddhism. And that's just something that I deal with in trying to contain myself as something. It's something that I've had to go through in my life with other aspects of who I am. And one of those was about what I did for many years of my life, from 89 through to 99 and beyond. And it was what I did for a career. And I would always identify myself with what I did. And it was something that I hid behind, and something that I held up as a mask, that I am a this. I wasn't going to start with saying that, but I'm going to come back and then go back into what I was talking about. When I think about why I practice Buddhism, or the Dharma, and I'll say I'm a Buddhist in that context, is because it's the most sane solution I've stumbled upon in an insane world. And the insanity that I've experienced in myself over many years, it was the sanest solution that I came across. Some may know, some don't. From about 1987, I won't go into my full history, but from 1987, I somehow bumped into a drug called heroin. And since 1997 until 3 years ago, I've had a life that has been destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed, rebuilt, destroyed, rebuilt. So many times over that very cycle in its own became an addiction of falling over, rebuilding, falling over, rebuilding, falling over. The amount of suffering I experienced in that is what's led me to that statement that it's the most sanest solution. Because in 1999, I went to a Vipassana meditation retreat on the advice of, second-hand advice of someone, Tim Finn from Crowded House. He was talking about it, and 10 years before I actually went, and I couldn't remember the name Vipassana. All I remembered was this retreat you went on. They meditated a lot, and somehow I bumped into someone who'd just come back from it, and I didn't. It was a quick conversation, and I thought it was hammocks, and you kind of did some yoga in lunchtime, and stuff like that. And of course, I had a fearsome heroin addiction at the time, so I've gone up there and detoxed whilst doing this 10-day meditation retreat. And I don't know if anyone has experienced opium addiction. It's not something I advise you to do too often, but I didn't know what I didn't know what to expect, and it was after 7 or 8 days of meditating 14 hours a day, and on the 8th day I had an experience that was a seed that had changed my life, which I believe is what brings me here to this seat today. And it was just purely a dhyana experience. That's all it was. But at the time, considering what my life had been, it was like a veil had parted, and I experienced clarity and serenity that I just don't remember experiencing, because I don't have a vivid memory of my childhood. I have to ask my parents what I was like as a kid, because I don't remember anything. So that, of course, that didn't stop what I was going through. You know, from '99 through to now, you know, I've appeared at like 18 long-term rehabs and 40 detoxes, and done geographicals across the planet, you know, to try and quit what was happening in my life, and just nothing was working. I had no control of what I was doing. And a lot of people would say, hey, oh, come on, what do you mean you've got no control? You know, you have choice. And when I'm insane, I don't have choice. And that was something I come to realise, that when I'm insane, that means when I'm not of my right mind, I don't have a choice. My subconscious mind takes over. My conscious, you know, I don't think I could explain the neurological mechanics. I could actually, for another talk, I could talk about that. But what was important was that I had no control, and I didn't understand what was happening to me. I had a baby child that, you know, and I don't share this too often, but on the night she was born, I'd run off to get my drug of choice while she's at the hospital with my then partner. You know, it was these kind of things that I look back on with an immense amount of shame and guilt for some time, to think, how could I do that? And then after 3 or 4 years old, how could I leave them, and how could I continue on? How could I not provide child support? How could I just live a life that was just about the most selfish, self-centred things that I could do? It was just about getting drugs, or acquiring funds to get the drugs. And I don't need to go into how that was done, but you can use your imagination. None of the precepts were followed to do that. And then that would just be dissolved into my body for moments of peace, sometimes hours of peace, and then I'd just do it again, every day, over and over and over again, for years. I'd go into detox, get clean. But in the back of my head, that experience I had at Vipassana always stuck with me, you know, and I'd come out of a rehab environment, I'd have an A4 sheet of paper that had all the days of the week written out, Monday to Friday, Saturday, Sunday, with the hours, and I would always have a meditation, 7 or 8, you know, make lunch, yoga in the afternoon. I'd map out this diary of how my life was going to be when I walked out. And when I got out, it was always within 2 weeks I was back putting needles in my arm. I couldn't understand. This was the life I wanted to lead, but this is actually what I was doing. There was a cognitive dissonance that was happening, and an incongruency with the outside world that was just driving me mad. 3 years ago, I just surrendered. I had enough. I was so beaten from it that I just had enough. It didn't just happen like a bolt of lightning or anything like that. It was a short, sustained period of time. And, you know, I went to a rehab in Sydney. You know, I'm in a 12-step fellowship as well, you know, so there's another Sangha that I'm involved with, and I needed to be, because just everyone was sharing the same experience. But in Sydney, when I was there, I became introduced to the Sydney Buddhist Centre, and there was an order member there who was also in the 12-step fellowship, and he was running a Friday night group there that was teaching us how to meditate. And that's where I learnt the Metabhavana meditation, and it was the Metabhavana meditation for me that has kept me here. It was the very thing that sort of like a hook that grabbed onto me, because I remember Mum, who's in a nursing home now, I care for her. You know, I sometimes go in there in the mornings, I sit there with a cup of coffee and I just ask her questions about what I was like, because, you know, I couldn't figure out what went wrong. How could I go from, you know, being a child to living this sort of self-hedonistic, destructive life? And she would say, oh, you know, because I come from a big ethnic family and there was lots of us and we were always at each other's houses. I didn't have many friends outside of my community. And she'd say, Adem, everyone thought you were golden-hearted. That was one of the phrases she used, that you had a golden heart and everyone loved you, and all the aunties, you were everyone's little favourite for some reason. And I remember her, when she first used to say that, I used to think, where the hell is that person? You know, who is that person and where is that person, for years? And I remember beginning to practice the Metabhavana was almost like a and this is coinciding with being clean for a few months as well, the fog lifting a little bit, and starting to feel this sense of metta in little pockets here and there. Admittedly, at the beginning, I think it's called beginner's mind maybe, or beginner's metta, I don't know, felt like it. It was intense, and it was intense enough for me to have an experience that made me realise that this is not bullshit, this was real, what was happening. It wasn't like I was reading a book and having a good feeling. I was actually practicing something, and I was experiencing something from it. Sometimes I would say that feeling has lessened over these years, that first experience is what kept me going, but that's not because the practice doesn't work, it's because my practice has lessened because of certain environmental conditions in my life. And that's a good segue for me, because that was the other thing, was about the Four Noble Truths. I know there's a lot of lists in Buddhism, but I like to keep it simple. KISS, keep it simple, stupid. That's for me, really. The Four Noble Truths, and the idea that my conditioning of my mind is what has caused all this. And that with this, to look back at a life where for 30 years I used heroin, and to think of that over a period of time as a wasted life was something really difficult to deal with as a person. That I just pissed away a career, I pissed away a family, friends, connections, consistency, money, not that stuff matters, just a life. And, I'm 51 years old, and what have I got to show for it? I was on the dole, I was whatever. It was really difficult to deal with that. Buddhism, in a sense, gave me this sense that in some way I was fortunate to have come across addiction, which is what Buddhism seems to, talk about a great deal, that here I was confronted for 30 years of my life with one of the most fearsome forms of addiction, this external chemical, driven by my internal addictions. And that if I can overcome that and change the conditions of that, then there's a lot in life that could hit me through all my senses that I could deal with now in my life. And since then, I've had a lot to deal with. Things that past 3 years ago, if they had have occurred, I would have turned to a needle within seconds. It wouldn't have even been a thought. Whereas now the thought doesn't even come across my mind anymore. I lie, it has come across my mind a couple of times. But they're thoughts now, they're not obsessions. The obsessions that I had around using, where I'd wake up in the morning and the first thing would be like barking dogs, would be, I need heroin. Whereas now, compared to that, I feel like I appreciate a simpler life. I won't say I've got a most absolute simple life, but I appreciate things. I'm very grateful for what I have. I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful my daughter's back in my life. My brother and sister, allow me to have my mum's bank account number again. I'm employed now, whereas I hadn't been employed for so long, except, doing here and there self-generated work. But, I just thought that was the end of the road. I was just going to die, a sad old death, bitter, sad and old. And right now I'm far from that. Well, the last month for me has been very emotional, things going on in my life, but you know what? I don't feel that sense of doom, impending doom. Considering the world I'm embedded in, that seems like it's moving at 1,000 miles an hour to an impending doom, I can still kind of move through life with just a sense of, not all the time, but with a sense of tranquility, with a sense of acceptance, some tolerance, some patience as well, some good connections in my life as well. Some of the real most simple things that I missed incredibly throughout the years of addiction, where I was quite alone a lot of the time. And so I've learnt to just appreciate the very things that enrich my life. I don't chase the golden cage anymore, whereas that was something that was conditioning that I was brought up with. So maybe to use Steve's phrase earlier when we were talking, I said, I'm not a Buddhist. He goes, what, you're a closet Buddhist? And I thought, that's really befitting. Maybe I'm a closet Buddhist. I'll come out one day. But yeah, an interesting journey, and it continues on. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you, Adem. Thank you.